Well, when it comes to changing gender roles, let's not lose sight of the other half of the equation, the male half. In the last few decades, more and more men have been taking up slack at home, and this trend has been bolstered since the last recession, which had a disproportionate impact on male-dominated industries like construction. Yes, men now spend twice as much time with housework and almost 3 times as much time with their kids as they did in 1965. But despite how much we say we revere father involvement, too many men, particularly divorced and separated fathers, are up against barriers that keep them away from their kids that are just as unfair as the ones that kept us away from law school and medical school. Too many boys are growing up without adequate role models. They're failing in school, and they're lacking the support and the guidance they need to become the successful men they want to be. For every man who winds up dead, in prison, or otherwise relegated to the margins of society, that's one less date, one less boyfriend, one less husband or partner, and one less involved father. That's why we need to care about men. We need to do this because we women really can't reach our full potential at work unless we allow men to reach their full potential in the home as caretakers and as co-parents. And we need to care about men because when one sex gets an abundance of attention and support, while the needs and the struggles of the other are neglected, both sexes suffer. That's why we need to pay as much attention to men's issues as we do to women's issues. With this in mind, I would like to introduce Stephen Svoboda of the National Coalition for Men.
Hi everybody. My first challenge here is figuring out how to get my PowerPoint. Do you have it? So I'm going to sort of refer to the PowerPoint intermittently and also talk about some issues that aren't related to it. So yeah, I'm Stephen Svoboda. I'm with an organization called the National Coalition for Men. And the first thing I want to say to you is I don't really like our name. I've never liked it. I would never join an organization for men. That's not the kind of person I am. And really very few, if no, people in the organization are that way. We're really about an opportunity for everybody, you know, fighting barriers that exist for men and fighting barriers that exist for women. And to give you an example, one of our first concrete victories was back in the, it was early 80s. We were founded in 1977. Back in the early 80s, we brought a lawsuit to compel New York area airports to have changing rooms for men, which nobody did back then. So is that a victory for men? Well, sort of, kind of. It's a victory for everybody because if the man can take, the father can take the baby and the mother has something they have to do, then that's a win for everybody. So it doesn't always break down as a gender oppositional thing. And the lawyer that brought that case actually was the former president of a National Organization for Women chapter, and right now we have a National Organization for Women chapter, the past president is one of our board members, both females obviously, and other women involved also. So they don't see it as a male versus female situation either, and neither do we. A while back where they positioned a confederate of the study designers in a park with a child. And the child's blanket wasn't either classically male nor classically female. It was ambiguous, and they surreptitiously filmed passersby that came up. And this is what would typically happen. The passerby would say, "Oh, what a cute baby," and the confederate of the study people would say, "Oh, thank you," and the person would say, "Oh, is it a boy or a girl?" And the person with the baby would shrug her shoulders and say, "I don't know," and they look at her oddly, and she'd say, "Oh, I'm not the parent, I'm just taking care of the baby while the parents are off doing an errand." And so, almost without exception, these strangers tried to unfasten the baby's blanket and see what it was. And the study designers deliberately set it up so that the blanket couldn't be taken off. And the lengths that some of these people went to try to find out if it was a boy or a girl was amazing. So, I also want to say that this gender polarity can really get us into trouble because a small percentage of people in this country, about 1%, actually are neither male nor female. And I went to a conference, I just got back the day before yesterday, And one of the presenters there was intersex, and she actually had dinner at my house last night with along with a couple other people. And my son is 12 and a half, and you know, boys always trying to, or anybody who's 12 and a half is trying to tell you they know everything about the world. But I mentioned to him, oh, you know, one of our people who's coming for dinner tonight is neither male nor female. Did you know that exists? And he's like, oh, I know, and really bored, and like completely uninterested. I mean, this woman is totally out. She identifies primarily as a woman, and she's completely out on the issue. And my son was completely uninterested in like asking her about, oh, what is it like being you know, intersex, and how's your life? Completely uninterested. And I thought that was a huge victory, because like, you know, it's not even interesting to him. Like, it's so boring. These issues of definition aren't even something he wants to spend his time on. So I was really pleased with that. So yeah, I'm so interested in gender that I've read about 400 books on gender in the last 16 years. I've published about 200 reviews of books. Out of those 400, not got paid a penny for any of that. And it's because I'm fascinated by issues male and female, and trying to understand us and understand the world. And that's really what led to me joining the National Coalition for Men back in 1995. So let's see, let me go back to my PowerPoint now. The boy problem. So we do sort of have a problem with boys that we're noticing in recent years. Girls are getting into college much more than boys, close to 60%. Now, in a way, that's a good thing. We know that in the past, women have had more difficulties in success in the outer world, and now they're having that, and that's great. To a point, but when it gets to the point where 60% or more of university attendees are female, university administrators tell us that that's the tipping point at which it gets problematic, because frankly, although certainly I totally agree, people come in all varieties in this world, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, but still the majority of people are heterosexual, and a lot of people do go to college hoping maybe they'll meet a partner. I mean, if you're gay or lesbian, that can be the same thing. You can be going to college for that reason too. But if the mix of genders goes below a certain point, college administrators tell us that's a problem. And obviously we want boys to be going to college and succeeding as well as girls, and I think everybody in this room would agree with that. Now my challenge is getting to the next slide. Here we go. So, right, so there's missing men on campus lately. There's a gender gap that's turning up, and you know, I can't really fault people who sort of feel like, well, there was a gender gap historically, as you see from this slide, and so now the gender gap's going the other way, and the gap isn't as much now as it was in the other direction back in the 60s. At the same time, I think this is an exciting time. I think that we're really breaking a lot of past thinking. We have men having a greater freedom in terms of what they can wear, how they can appear. We have women having greater freedom too. It's not, we're far from in the promised land yet. Things are far from perfect, but I think moving in a good direction. I think that's very exciting. And I think probably most people in this room, if they really search their heart and think about it, really don't want either males or females to be getting in a situation where they're in sort of the dominant position. I think we can all agree on that. So I don't want to make a huge deal out of this, but I just want to note that this is something that people are concerned about and we're working on. Now, if you look at the health area, men do have certain lackings in that area too. They die at a younger age, statistically not as empowered or not as able to go and get their health checkups that they should be getting. And what I would like to see is an attempt to make healthcare male-friendly a bit more. Maybe by, I mean, this sounds so ridiculous and maybe patronizing, but there honestly are a lot of men out there who, if you say to them, hey dude, you know, why don't you go get your annual tune-up, you know, you get your car tuned up, go get your body tuned up, you know, your wife and your kids need you around, you know. If you say it to them, it sounds dumb, maybe nobody in this room would be in that situation, but a lot of men will actually respond to that more than, you know, you need to go have your checkup because you might have this condition, you might have that condition, and your wife does it, so you should do it too. They're just not going to do it. So it's a small point, it's just something to think about. I really do honestly believe that when everybody wins, or when one party wins, everybody wins, and that we're really not in a binary situation where any gain for men is a loss for women or vice versa. I really do believe that. So domestic violence and abuse, there's a misunderstanding that, I mean, I totally can relate to where people are coming from on this, but there is a misunderstanding that most or all domestic violence victims are female, and unfortunately that's not true. I mean, I'm not happy saying this, but domestic violence is a two-way street, and it's very harmful to children. Studies have clearly shown that the common sense proposition that we already know, that seeing domestic violence is one of the worst things that can happen to a child if there's a child in the family or children in the family. So for their sake alone, we really need to be sensitive to that, and men need recourse as well as women. Right now, there's very little recourse available to men. Both genders have certain areas that are inhibited and asking for help in, and this is one in which men, the same guy that I was telling you earlier about posing his health care in terms of a tune-up for a car, that same guy's going to have a lot of trouble going to the police or even going to his buddy and saying, hey, you know, my wife beat me up. I mean, it's like, dude, what are you, some sort of wimp? I mean, why did you let that happen? You know, and talking in a high voice and make fun of him. Whereas what happens sometimes is women use weapons as equalizers. I mean, and some women are physically bigger than their partners. It's not statistically so common. I know a few couples that are like that. Whatever the reason is, sometimes it's just the element of surprise. You're not expecting something, somebody else is prepared for it. So, at the National Coalition for Men, I mean, we're really not interested in fault finding or in comparing lows or whatever. I mean, you know, I would say probably women have had it worse than men overall. So the National Coalition for Men is not trying to deny that. We're just trying to talk about making things more equitable. So as far as men earning more, there has been some work about employment recently. Dr. Warren Farrell published a book called 25 Steps to Higher Pay to help women to learn how to get paid more. And it turns out that if you're willing to move to other cities if necessary and take jobs at inconvenient hours and things like that, that women can basically equalize the pay of men in the same field. So that's the good news, that childless, educated men and childless, educated women in the same field are just about exactly the same. So that's the good news. There are a lot of challenges to get to a point of equity that we want to get to, but that's the good news. And men work more, and it is at a cost. You know, I'm relatively lucky. My wife and I are about an equal playing field in terms of earning power, but I know a lot of couples struggle with this. Maybe one partner has higher earning power and feels compelled to work long hours. Sometimes it's the man, sometimes it's the woman. I'm telling you, I know making the mortgage can be tough, especially in this area. I mean, check your bank account, you make it by $3 or whatever it is. It can be tough within the Bay Area. So we've all got to pull together and do what we can. I'm very happy to see women rising in the workplace. It makes the workplace more interesting, more fun. I'm a patent lawyer myself, so in my job it's still more men than women, but women are definitely gaining a lot. My main sort of colleague slash mentor, sort of same level person who sort of trained me in how to be a more effective patent lawyer was a woman about 15 years younger than I am, and I'm really grateful for that, and we're good friends, and it's just really invaluable, I think, to have people who are racial minorities, which is already also happening increasingly in the workplace. It's people of alternative sexual orientations is very helpful. Caretaking in the home. So men are taking on more work in the home, and probably more could be done in that area. There are some studies that have been sort of problematic in that they define housework in a way that focuses on the women's contribution and forgets that taking the car in for maintenance or doing the finances, those are also part of what you might call housework. Anything basically to keep the household running. So and I don't think that was a deliberate flaw. I think just when you say housework, people tend to think of doing the laundry, cooking dinner, cleaning up dishes, and look at those things. So I think we're all pulling together. I mean, studies actually show that we're both working more, both men and women are working more than we did in the past, and that's not particularly good news either. It's just sort of the fact of the world we're in these days. So I am excited though, because and heartened, because I do see that men and women are getting beyond a win-lose way of looking at things and pulling together. And of course, one aspect of women's equality and women growing in power is that any relationships does also happen a fair amount these days, and that's always a sad event. You have children on the scene. It does need to happen sometime for sure. So let's see. Lacking the rights needed to fulfill responsibilities. So I just gave a presentation last week about German law. I don't speak German. I had to have all these cases and articles translated. But the interesting thing about the German constitution and legal system, which is actually very similar to the US despite being civil law. We're common law and Europe is civil law. But what's interesting is it was created, the legal system was created about 4 years after World War II, and they created a constitution and also the ability that the courts have to overrule the legislator created law, which, for example, in the UK, you can't do that. In the UK, if there's a law in the books, the court can't overrule it. It can interpret it, but it can't change it. But Germany can, so that's one similarity to the US. But one interesting difference is that Germany focuses on rights and responsibilities both, whereas in this country, we really just focus on rights. I mean, I can't really think of any constitutional provision or any core law of our country that talks about responsibilities. And I think that's unfortunate. And I think we need to focus more on responsibilities and think about what do we need to do. We're on the planet. If we produce children, we need to think about what we need to do for those children. And certainly, men have definitely fallen down on that in the past. I mean, you know, I'm not going to stand up here and deny that. I mean, there's been problems with that in the past. I think things are improving a lot. And I think as men get more right to have access to their children after divorce, that will also encourage them more and incentivize them more to do the right thing all the way along the way. It happens to men, you know what? It happens to women too. There's a really good movie that came out in January called Divorce Court. It just played for 1 week in Emeryville. Divorce, CORP, period. The idea being that the divorce process is milking large amounts of money from the former family, and unfortunately, oftentimes the divorce lawyers frankly extract pretty much all the net worth of the family until both members are basically left penniless, and that's a sad story. I don't know what we can do to fix that. What I do know is that everybody deserves a fair shake, and there were stories of women who were wrongly denied access to their children in that movie. That's a tragedy. There were stories of men who were wrongly denied access to their children with no wrongdoing or anything like that, and that's a tragedy. Some of those men and women were actually present at the showing that I went to. They were there, they stayed, they talked to the audience afterwards, and I mean, it was a very powerful thing, and somewhat disheartening. But I do feel in general, as I say, that things are getting a lot better. I mean, I look back when I started in the National Coalition for Men, at this point I am the longest continually serving board member. I started almost 2 decades ago, and I look back and think about that meeting in my house in 1995, and a lot's gotten better. I mean, I think a lot of the young people coming up they just don't like divisive thinking. They just think, how can we do things that works for everybody? And they're really showing us the way. Right now, some of the work I'm doing, some of my best colleagues are literally half my age or less. And I mean, one of them is a feminist, really strong feminist, and several of them are just thinking so creatively, and it's really inspiring. And I look around this room, and thank you all for being here and for listening to us talk. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I'm really trying to make the world a better place. And you know, the last thing I want is any sort of divisive politics. What I really want to see is everybody able to stand to their fullest potential and not be stopped by any barriers based on preconceived notions. Oh, you're gay, so this, or you're straight, so that, or you're a man, so you're going to act this way, or you're a woman, you're going to act that way, you're Latino, you're going to act this way, you're disabled, you're going to act that way. All that we're working to eliminate, and I think with your help we can do it. Thank you.